All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome. Diana, could you do a roll call, please?
Your worship, I can confirm Development Services Coordinator Allison Adams and myself, Acting Clerk Diana Wilson, are in attendance at the Township Office. For those participating by video conference, please answer present when your name is called. Mayor Mennel.
Present.
Deputy Mayor Jaguar.
Present.
Councillor Widner.
Present.
Councillor Moore.
Present.
Councillor Cerna. Councillor Lewis. Councillor Galinsky.
Present.
Chief Administrative Officer Adam Betteridge.
Present.
Manager of IT Cecil Coxon.
Present.
Director of Public Works Matt Sweetland.
Present.
Monteith Brown Planner Jay McGuffin.
Present.
Monteith Brown Planner Dan Smith.
Present.
And that's everyone, your worship.
Thanks, Dana. The purpose of this public meeting is to discuss the comprehensive review and a 5-year update of the official plan for the Township of Malahide, and to allow the public to speak on matters related to proposed revisions. Allison, could you summarize any comments received to date, please? I know Allison was here. She was here a second ago.
I am here. Through your worship.
There you go.
Okay. Through your worship, the official plan review process was circulated and advertised in accordance with Planning Act requirements. There has been feedback from the public for notification of the official plan review. 2 individuals have registered for tonight's virtual meeting. First, David Rowe, professional planner representing Carolyn Davis, an owner of land in the hamlet of Colton, who would like the boundaries extended for lot creation along Richmond Road, north of Colton Line. Mr. Rowe wishes to speak to council this evening. Secondly, Kelvin Sarlos, on behalf of himself and Dick Greenway, are available for questions as they would pertain to the hamlet expansion of Kingsville Corners for lot development along Dorchester Road, north of Ron McNeil Line. Other requests received to date have been summarized and included in the Monteith Brown Planning Consultants reports and materials that will be presented by Jay McGuffin. Nancy Passato, Planning Manager with the County of Elgin, has provided comments that Mr. McGuffin will also speak to.
Okay, thank you, Allison. Now, Jay and Dan, I'll ask you to carry on. So whoever wants to go first, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening. Good evening, members of council and the members of public that are here this evening. Is it okay if I share my screen at this time? I have a presentation that I'd like to take council through. Can everybody see that okay?
Yep, we're good.
Perfect. So again, thanks for joining us this evening at the virtual special public meeting following through in accordance with the Planning Act for the comprehensive review and 5-year update of the Township of Malahide official plan. So just quickly going over the agenda for this evening, I'll have a number of sort of background slides. These are really just reminder slides for council and the public as to where we are in the process, why we're in the process, where we're going. And then we'll talk about the planning environment, a brief discussion on the population projections and the land supply and demand analysis that was undertaken as part of the comprehensive review. A quick discussion on the policy review and update section. So between the land supply and demand and the policy and review update, those are the 2 appendices that were attached to the background review document that has been posted online for quite some time now on the municipal website. And then I'm going to turn it over to Dan to run through the section on the recommended mapping changes. We intend to spend most of our time in this section of the presentation just reviewing with council the various alterations to the land, what we refer to as the land supply budget, the budget of designated development lands in the municipality. And then just really quickly a discussion on next steps and where we're going from here. And then we'll open up for a question and answer period with those members of council and the members of the public in terms of any input or comments or questions that they may have. So just by way of reminder, what is a comprehensive review? And this is a review of your official plan that considers alternative directions for growth or development and determines how best to accommodate the development and the provincial interests. So this is over and above just an official plan review or a policy review. So not only are we looking at those matters in the policy construct, but also looking at the consideration of your population and employment projections, evaluation of alternative directions for growth and development. This is a particularly important line item in the analysis that we're undertaking this evening. Opportunities to accommodate growth through intensification, another key component of the province. Physical constraints to accommodating the proposed development within your existing designated lands within your, what we'd again refer to as your land supply budget. Planning for infrastructure and public service facilities, including the ability to provide sewage and water services, being a critical aspect in terms of the provision of services for development within your settlement areas. And then also the consideration of cross-jurisdictional issues. And that would include things like dealing with the county or your abutting municipalities and relationships with them. So why are we here tonight? It's been a rather lengthy journey, in part a result of COVID, and secondly, so we had a draft background report to you back in January, but as a result of some changes at the municipality, it's taken a little bit to get us here. So we're very pleased to be here tonight to start to put in place the final elements of your official plan review. Tonight's purpose is to engage the public and council in a review and discussion based on the recommendations that we've brought forward as a result of all of our background work, and to obtain feedback from the public and council with respect to those recommendations, including both policy directions and most importantly, the mapping components of the official plan. And I'll remind council in our last meetings back in 2019, the mapping element was really the highlight of the discussions. Council had a lot of questions. There was a lot of discourse in regard to that, and a lot of direction provided to us to analyze that land distribution and analysis piece. And just reminding that the official plan review is a key exercise in how the township will implement the recommendations arising from almost all of its studies, including the service delivery review that was recently undertaken, which identified that growth, primary direction for growth and development in the municipality be directed towards Springfield. And just another reminder that the official plan remains the most important policy document in the provision and undertaking of public works. All public works are required to be consistent with your official plan. And so it is important that all of that is understood and undertaken into account when implementing an update to an official plan. So in recapping, back in January 2019, we had an information meeting, a public launch of the comprehensive review. Following up in early 2019, we had public meetings and stakeholder workshops. And after those public meetings and stakeholder workshops, we met with council for a roundtable. And then we went away and started doing all of our work and analysis. And then COVID hit and we had some delays with regard to COVID. And we're able to deliver a comprehensive background report that is before council this evening. It was provided back in January. And here we are now, June 28th, and we are in front of council to present that information that the municipality was provided back in January. So we've had the benefit of lots of discussion with internal staff in review of the document and understanding its recommendations. And as mentioned by Allison earlier, we've also received supplementary comments from the public and the county that have been included into our review and analysis. I don't think I really need to go over. I believe everybody that's present at the meeting this evening is aware of the planning environment. I've already identified, I guess the one thing that I should identify is that your original official plan was adopted in 2001 and subsequently received approval in 2003, and then wasn't again updated until 2013. We are now in the 5-year official plan review. And I will note that there are 2 elements to the provincial policy statement that changed in 2020. That change maintains the 5-year review period, If you do not do a completely new official plan, what is proposed for Malahide is not a new official plan, but an update to its existing official plan. And that maintains the 5-year review structure. If Malahide in the future were to determine it wanted to completely overhaul its official plan under the new provincial policy statement, that window afterwards becomes a 10-year window of review after the initial brand new official plan. And the other thing to mention is the status of the now county official plan, which did not happen at the time of your last official plan update. So your official plan was actually approved in advance of the county's official plan, the county's OP on the heels of yours. And at this time, both yourselves and the county are underway in undertaking an official plan update review. Malahide is further ahead, I understand, than the county is, but that again does create some cross-jurisdictional issues in terms of the consideration of the approval, how the approval at the county level will occur, and what is necessary to achieve that approval. So very quickly, just going over the population projections, this is the meat and potatoes of the MCR, or the comprehensive review. The municipality had retained Watson and Associates to undertake your DC charges update back in 2019. That coincided similarly with the start of the OP review. We'd had discussions at that time, and it was determined that Watson would, as part of their timeline, because it was far more aggressive in terms of meeting the needs of the Development Charges Act, would be responsible for undertaking the population projections to the determination of growth within the municipality. And they provided their population projections, which we then extrapolated in 2020, May of 2020, when the new provincial policy statement came into effect. There were some changes to provincial policy that affected how we plan for official plans. One of those changes was providing municipalities with the opportunity of expanding from a 20-year growth horizon in their official plan to a 25-year growth horizon in their official plan. This was a provincial response to some of the challenges related to the housing crisis that was being experienced throughout the province, and allowing for municipalities to increase the supply of designated lands within their land supply budgets within their official plans. This official plan update and review contemplates and considers that 25-year planning horizon versus the 20-year planning horizon, which allows for a continuation of an additional 5 years of land supply within your land supply budget. All of that said, by the end of the 25-year planning horizon at 2045, the projected population is expected to reach 11,860 people. When all of that is said and done, what that means is between 2019 and 2045, it's projected there will be demand for 798, or let's round out to 800 new dwelling units, with an additional approximately 2,040 new residents within the community. One of the elements too that has a drastic effect with respect to the municipality's land supply budget is the Malahide's higher than average persons per unit. So when we take a look at Malahide's persons per unit, on average, you're trending greater than 3 persons per unit. And I think you're down to, by the end of the 2045 planning period, down to just over 3 persons per unit. There are other municipalities in Ontario that trend around 2 persons per unit, and some that actually break below 2. Where you start to get an aging population. The importance of this number of persons per unit from a supply and demand perspective, when we look at our population projections, it means an additional person per household is accommodated within a dwelling unit. So for every dwelling unit you have, on more than what the provincial average may be, you have 0.5 to 1 persons more per unit residing in a dwelling. So you can actually, within your supply budget, you're actually accommodating more people than smaller municipalities, or other municipalities, not smaller, sorry, in the province as a whole. This is in part driven by larger household sizes, and we see that particularly related to your Amish and Mennonite communities within the area, where they'll have a larger number of persons per household. So the next element is looking at your land supply. So when we know how many people you are projected to receive, then we've got to do that analysis using the number of persons per unit and density calculations to identify within the 2,000 people where they're going to live and how much land or how many units do we need and on how much land is that. In recognition, the township does not require additional lands to accommodate its growth based on our analysis. It is recommended that the focus be placed on ensuring that underutilized lands in the designated hamlets be reallocated and adjusted to the village of Springfield, where opportunities for growth can more appropriately be allocated. Key factors that play in determining the location for growth include the geography, transportation linkages, constraints like proximity to livestock facilities, potential availability of full municipal services, the opportunities for and access to employment lands. Additional constraints would be natural heritage or natural environment features in and around some of the hamlets within the community that have significant bearing on the ability to provide for development on the lands that have otherwise been designated as residential. The County of Elgin has expressed support for the consolidation of development lands in their comments back to the municipality as a result of their preliminary review of the draft background report in supporting the reallocation of lands to the serviced village, the sanitary serviced village of Springfield, recognizing council's desire through its service delivery work to focus the extension of water services to Springfield. So that plays a very large part in terms of the determination of the recommendations that we're bringing forward to council this evening in terms of trying to create catalyst for the extension of water, trying to make it, trying to shorten the distance that water has to travel before it gets to designated development sites. Those are all part and parcel with some of the analysis that has been undertaken that stands behind the recommendations that we're providing to council this evening. Just very quickly, I'm going to just provide a high-level overview of the policy review and update that was undertaken. So this is part 2 of the OP review. I just concluded the MCRP, so the Municipal Comprehensive Review. That's your land use designations. This goes to that policy piece. So the plan has been updated to reflect the current situation with the most recent population projections to the year of 2045. There is a caveat in the information provided by the county in that ultimately they will be the ones that determine the distribution of growth throughout the various member municipalities in the County of Elgin. We're proposing an update to section 1.6 of your plan, which acknowledges the new hierarchy of the County of Elgin official plan within the planning framework in Malahide. And we're proposing updated policies related to settlement areas to mirror the policies in the 2020 provincial policy statement update, which permit the expansion of settlement boundaries at the time of a comprehensive review and adjustments to settlement area boundaries outside a comprehensive review, subject to sufficient planning justification being provided. So again, as a response to the housing crisis, the province has provided some additional tools to municipalities where sound planning is implemented and certain criteria are met. And we've proposed to Malahide to be able to take advantage of those when possible. One other matter that was considered was cannabis production and processing. And not to get into too much detail on this, but a new section is provided to give direction on the regulation of cannabis operations resulting from several inquiries that had been received by the township since the federal government has issued sweeping approvals for that industry. Cannabis production and processing is proposed to be permitted in agricultural industrial designations in the plan where it can be demonstrated by the applicant that the use will be compatible with the existing and planned surrounding land use, and putting together a structure of supporting studies necessary to implement those approvals. Rural and agricultural development. We're also proposing several amendments to address a variety of issues related to this matter. Further clarification and expansion on policies related to on-farm diversified uses to provide the township greater flexibility in assessing the types of uses that are permitted and the standards applying to those types of uses in the zoning bylaw. Second dwelling units. The Planning Act establishes permissions for second dwelling units. Currently, the municipality only permits second dwelling units in accessory dwellings in settlement areas. And we're looking at proposing some changes to that within the agricultural areas. And again, putting some specific policies around granny flat permissions, or what are referred to as garden suites, to be specifically addressed through the official plan, recognizing that the Planning Act allows for these. There have been several applications that have been taken advantage of with respect to this type of a use for the provision of secondary dwellings for granny suite purposes under this section of the Act. And so we are putting in policy structure around that as well. Industrial policies, another important piece. Conversion of employment areas. The new policy in the provincial policy statement, as I alluded to previously, allows municipalities now the opportunity to permit the conversion of employment lands outside of a comprehensive review, subject to sufficient planning justification being provided. So we've put together recommendations in terms of policies around that. That would then mean if lands were designated for employment, if sufficient and appropriate land use planning justifications were provided, those lands could be converted to an alternative land use without undertaking a comprehensive review. Another very innovative policy structure that we are proposing, responding to Malahide's chicken and egg perspective with regard to industrial development, is this idea of a home-based industrial park. And we have had success implementing this in one of your neighboring municipalities. We provided for what is called the Silver Moon Industrial Park in Thames Center. This is a stretch of land on the north side of Highway 41, or 401, excuse me, heading towards Dorchester. If anyone is familiar with Tubby Tires on the 401 on the north side of that expanse, that is one of these home-based industrial parks. And what it does is it provides opportunity for more rural-focused, home-based home industry, and creates an opportunity for like-minded individuals to live in a stretch of land or a subdivision on larger parcels of property where that home-based industry is a main component of the development and includes on-site dwelling for residential purposes for the proponent. So an agricultural welder or somebody to that effect, a tire service operation, somebody who's got an operation in the, I know council has other applications that it's considering, similar type of development for yards or construction type uses. These are uses that could very easily and appropriately be directed towards this type of a land designation, and controls put in place so that everybody living in this community recognizes that they're all of like mind, they're all going to be conducting a home-based business and they know what they're getting into, rather than trying to interject home-based industry into existing residential neighborhoods. And I've already sort of alluded to future urban growth. I've had brief discussions and provided information about the distribution of lands. What we've seen historically has been accelerated in the last 3 to 5 years as a result of a housing crisis, as a result of immigration policies at the federal level, as a result of housing prices in the GTA and the trickle effect. And then just as of recent, the impact of work from home legislation and a mass influx of people leaving the larger urban centers to absolve themselves of significant mortgages and rent payments to get out into smaller communities with greater access to tremendous opportunities for quality of life to be able to work remotely, has seen a shift in demand for residential lands in places not unlike Malahide. And the purpose and the intent of the recommendations that we're bringing forward is to position Malahide to be able to capture and capitalize on some of that growth capability, and create opportunity to create full municipally serviced areas within the Springfield settlement area. So at this time, what I'd like to do is I'd like to turn the presentation over to Dan, just so he can do a quick overview of the comments that we've received since posting of the background report. We had comments previous that had been included in our background report. Since posting, we've received a number of comments. I'll ask Dan to go through them and then to very quickly go through each of the settlement area slides to have a brief discussion about what the recommendation is for each settlement area and what it was grounded in. And then hopefully we can turn this over to a question and answer session with council and with the public. Thanks, Dan. All yours.
Thanks very much, Jay. Welcome, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Good evening. I'm coming to you from the far reaches of Middlesex County. I hope everyone can hear me okay. As Jay mentioned, we did have a number of comments and submissions made since the posting of the documents online. And this provides a brief summation of what the comments were basically about. The first one submitted on behalf of Carolyn Davis, Civic Planning Solutions. David Rowe is here tonight and will speak to that further. Basically objecting to the removal of about 3.6 hectares of lands from the settlement area boundary of Colton. Mr. Rowe is also representing Shackleton Auctions at 51570 Leon's Line, and they are seeking permission to expand an existing auction establishment that's been in operation for some time. And in recognition of that, there will be further planning approvals that will be required to see that expansion forward. So there'll be further discussion on that. Mr. Saralus at 12044 Dorchester Road has indicated that he concurs with our recommendation that we provide for some industrially designated land on Dorchester Road at Kingsville Corners. There are some other details to be worked out on that, depending on how basically development proceeds for that. There are also some details to be worked out with respect to the minimum floor areas of shops and of the dwellings. And those details can all be ironed out as we progress further on with the consideration of this area. Rosemary Kennedy has had some initial discussions with the township about the redesignation of her lands to industrial. She had indicated that she would prefer residential designation, and we understood that she was going to provide some written comments, although we haven't been made aware of anything yet. But although in recognition that the process is still ongoing, there's certainly time for folks to submit their comments and concerns. So that's basically a summary of what we've heard since the documents were posted.
Okay. Thank you for those comments, Dan. Anything else before we go into public consultation?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I was going to have Dan read through, just give a description of the proposed changes to all of the mapping.
Okay, go ahead, Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. By way of a brief introduction here, there are a number of built-up areas within the municipality which we refer to and which have historically been referred to as settlement areas. Those settlement areas consist of two recognized villages, Springfield and Port Bruce. Then there are the settlement areas that comprise the 10 hamlets, 10 recognized and designated hamlets in the township. We also have a number of what we refer to as suburban areas. These are areas that don't have any defined definition as far as development goes, but do comprise a mix of land uses both on the east and west sides of Aylmer. And those are also recognized as settlement areas for the purposes of the official plan. I propose to just briefly go through the maps and review the changes we have recommended, keeping in mind that a detailed review of all the areas and how we arrived at our recommendations are all documented in quite some detail as part of the background report. So the information is there and it's available to council and certainly to the public as well. Jay had mentioned in part of his presentation that we looked at a number of constraining features when we were looking at the changes in designation, the changes in the settlement area boundaries. Those are significant. They can't be overlooked, and they range from natural heritage features, proximity to livestock operations. Certainly access to servicing is important, and road access, linkages in that sense. We've had a number of applications throughout the years where access to undeveloped lands was a significant issue, and came into play on more than one occasion. First off, getting to the village of Springfield, you can see the bright yellow there is basically showing the existing limits of the village boundary. The darkened area, the dashed line, is our proposed new settlement area for Springfield. Basically, coming in, doubling the size of the settlement area. By and far, most of the lands that would be changed or brought into the village boundary would be the lands that Jay had mentioned as a future urban growth area, and also some new industrial considerations, new industrial lands in the southeasterly quadrant of the village as well. So those are the significant changes. There are some minor things that we are looking at as well, but those are by and far the most significant, with some additional lands designated for residential purposes along both Springfield and Ron McNeil line up in the northwest corner. Moving on to Port Bruce, as you can see there, considerable downsizing of the residential designation on the north side of Imperial and Rush Creek. A lot of those areas up there are heavily constrained by natural features, and so we pulled back on those areas.
Dan,
In
before
Avon,
I move on to the next one, is there not still a plan of subdivision on the Bluffs? I know it started 40 years ago. Can you give me some information on that?
Mr. Mayor, I can recall some discussions we had at our meetings back in 2019 on that, and I was not able to find any information subsequent to that on the proposed subdivision. I'm not sure even if it had reached draft plan approval stage or not.
Okay, because there was a sign down at the bottom, recreational lots on the top of the Bluffs up until about 2 years ago.
Through your worship, I can weigh in here. I did ask Nancy Passato whether there was any draft approved status applications remaining on the books for the Township of Malahide. In her review, and I would assume that she didn't do a fulsome review, but in her records, she did not see any applications that had still had active draft plan status. So essentially that means that either there may have been a concept prepared at one time. In my experience, that's often happened where a landowner will throw up a concept to spur interest in buying, having them develop, but that doesn't mean that there's a draft plan. We can look into that further. We can park that section there and come back to it and whether it's determined if there's an active draft plan there. But until we know for certain, we're of the opinion that there is not an active draft plan of subdivision.
Okay, thanks, Adam.
Hey, Dave,
Yes.
I do remember what you're talking about, and I think there was a bit of they did show some drawings, some conceptual drawings. I think it fell apart when it came to road access. I think it wasn't just doable.
I know that was the problem for going forward, that the road was going to be a multi-million-dollar project, so that's why they never moved on it. But I thought there was still a draft plan of subdivision on the bluffs.
I don't know, could be. Can't get a road to it, it's no good, I guess.
All right, carry on, Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The hamlet of Avon. We're really basically recommending the downsizing to basically reflect the existing development in recognition that there are no services in the hamlet. And again, in the interest of redesignating some of that growth land to Springfield. So it would be reduced from the current area of approximately 38 hectares down to just a little more than 9 hectares. And again, that's to reflect existing development along Putnam Road and Avon Drive. In the hamlet of Colton, again, we are recommending that the areas be pulled back to reflect the existing linear development along Colton Line, excuse me, and Richmond Road. There is an area just to the west, as you can see, with some existing development there. But we pulled the boundary back to reflect what has historically been designated. Excuse me. For Copenhagen, we have by and far the largest of the hamlet settlement areas. We are removing the residential designation that essentially extends into agricultural lands lying along both sides of Imperial Road. And that would take the area down to about 61 hectares from its current 94 hectares.
Hey, Dan, going back to Copenhagen, on the northeast corner, I thought that was all done too. That used to be the Prendergast property. And I thought when they sold off the access lot off Nova Scotia that wasn't a doable proposition anymore, but is that not right or no?
Sorry, which area you're referring to?
Be the northeast. Yeah, right there. Now they used to have an access road that was open down off Nova Scotia line, but that lot ended up being sold. That was up to them. They wanted to do that, which closed off access to the property, which I thought at that time that made that whole thing not doable. But
I know when Prendergast opened or owned it, they still had a plan of subdivision, and then they sold it to Zimmers, and Zimmers were no longer interested in the plan of subdivision. So they withdrew that application.
okay. So the property is doable or not doable?
Dan?
Well, it would appear at the north end there that you still have some available access. It doesn't look like the parcel is landlocked, but again, it would depend on how readily readily serviceable those lands could be. That would be one consideration. We're leaving those lands in that residential designation in the hamlet settlement area boundary. So there would still be consideration given if a proposal came through that was satisfactory to the township.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I was going to add something there, but at the time you were asking the question, my security alarm went off and I didn't want to deafen everybody by turning the volume on. I just wanted to add, when we take a look at the developability of the lands, we had investigated the access points. There appeared to be a significant access point on the north end and then a subsequent access point further south. And again, building off the success on the interior of this particular subdivision that's just finishing off now, that was identified as the reasoning and rationale to allow these lands to continue. If we had the advantage of the air photo overlay here, you would note that there's a fair amount of natural heritage, natural hazard influence on both of these lands, which make development very difficult. And that was really the deciding factors in terms of removing these two parcels, but retaining the.
Okay, thank you, Jay.
Thanks.
Moving on over to Kingsville Corners. We really did not identify a change in the boundary per se, but we did identify a potential location on the east side of Dorchester Road as a location for possible home-based industrial park. And this would be the significant change to that hamlet. Bearing in mind, of course, that we will require further discussion with council on these areas to iron out some of the details, some of the policy, applicable policy that we want to look at applying to these lands. But it certainly is a consideration that we're giving to the area.
Right, and there's already some businesses there. So that may be a naturally allowable area. I don't know that, but there's 3 or 4 businesses operating out of Kingsville Corner now. And it's working well, so. Maybe
Yes,
it's
that's
worth
correct.
consideration.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. That's absolutely correct, Mr. Widner. In fact, council will likely recall there was an active application several years ago for an auto body shop,
Yep.
which was supported by the entire community.
Yeah, that's right. It's working well.
For the hamlet of Luton, there's no significant changes being proposed as well. The one exception would be a small pocket of residential land, or designated land at least, north of the Colton line. Luton is one of those traditional hamlet areas that has really developed in a linear fashion all the way between John Wise and Colton. And it really has historically been designated as such just to recognize basically the limits of existing development. For the hamlet of Leons, we have a small reduction in the overall size, moving from 59 to 51 hectares, removing a designation at the north end and a smaller area to the south, but pretty much everything else is intact. There is a small sliver of land that you'll see on the east side of the boundary which we are proposing to add to the designation. For Mount Salem, we have recommended reductions to both to areas along both the north and the southerly limits of the hamlet area. These were really areas that we saw no potential for development, given the limitations, restrictions in the areas, and again the desirability of having these lands transferred to the growth area of Springfield. For Orwell, we have the removal of a small portion, a rectangular portion of land south of Weldon that would come out. Otherwise, the designation of that hamlet boundary would remain fairly intact. You would be losing about 4.6 hectares. For South Gore, a few small changes in there, just to again more or less reflect the limits of existing development, pull the boundaries in a bit to reflect that. Summers Corners, no recommended changes to that area, and you can see that there are a number of livestock facilities, active facilities, sort of around the perimeter of that hamlet, which would certainly be a negative influence on any proposed expansions into those areas, encroachments into those areas. Now we're into the what we call the suburban designation. This one on the north side of the town of Aylmer, again, doesn't have any hard and fast defined boundary in the sense that the other settlement areas do, but we are proposing no basic changes in this to the settlement area in this area of Malahide. Aylmer East, by and far the most significant change here would be the identification again of a potential site for one of the home-based industrial parks, an irregularly shaped parcel just based on its size and situation. Again, this is open for further discussion. It's been identified as one of a number of potential sites. Moving to what's referred to as Aylmer South and West, we have the recommended area is again 6.88 hectares. There's no settlement area boundary, and we're recommending the removal of an area to the at the extreme westerly limits, south of Talbot Line, and to again reflect the commercial development that has occurred historically along Talbot, and there will be no change to the residential enclave that is situated south of Brookline. This became an interesting exercise in looking at possible locations. Very important, I think, significant for the township would be some future sites for some possible general industrial designations, sort of carry on from the success of the township's current existing official industrial park up across from the police college, looking at sites on the north side of College Line, some potential locations there, which would take full advantage of the of the servicing that is available or potentially available, both sanitary and water, that would run through the area. And also in conjunction with that, the site of another home-based industrial park setting, which would take advantage of a location along Springfield and would be in close proximity to the limits of the village. So all in all, we thought that this was made good planning sense, and that you know, it certainly should be given consideration. There would also be some revisions to the settlement area boundary as a result of those industrial areas being brought in. But again, that's some detail that has to be looked at further yet. The other home-based industrial park, as I mentioned, is we're looking at a location in the south end of, bringing it in the south end of Springfield, and it would certainly add to the proposed commercial designation that we're looking at along Springfield as well. A complementary designation, we feel that would be an impressive gateway into the community. Well, basically, at the end of all this exercise, it seems like there's a lot of back and forth, and that we're I talk about losing land, and perhaps that's not the right language here, because at the end of the day, when you look at the amount of lands that have been redesignated from the settlement areas to agricultural, you're coming in at about 177 hectares. If you take and factor in the opposite, that the lands that we're looking at moving from an agricultural designation to one of the to the hamlet areas or the village of Springfield, you're looking at an almost identical number. So at the end of the day, we're talking more about reallocating lands. We're not losing or gaining. We're reallocating in the best manner that we're aware of. So that basically sums up my part of the presentation.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Dan. Anything to add before we move on to public, Jay?
I was just going to give a brief discussion on next steps, and then we're all done. So where do we go from here? So again, Dan's mentioned looking for some input from council tonight, and we'll review and hear from the public. We'll take all of that direction and prepare and finalize the recommended policy changes, the settlement area boundary revisions, and any associated land use redesignations, and craft that in the form of an actual draft official plan amendment. We'll schedule a public meeting for council adoption of that official plan amendment. That'll be the statutory public meeting in which council makes a determination on adopting. And then that adopted official plan amendment will be forwarded to the County of Elgin for final approval through that approvals process.
Okay, thanks, Jay.
Thank you.
Next, we'll move on to any persons which wish to make comments or questions. And David Rowe has asked to be on. So David, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Dave. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. First of all, I'd like to commend the planners, both at the municipality as well as Monteith Brown, for the report that they have done. This is well done, well laid out, easy for the public to understand, and certainly in terms of being able to reach the public in a clear manner. Again, I commend them, having been involved myself in quite a number of 5-year reviews and new official plan exercises. I was retained in representing tonight Caroline Davis from Colton. And as outlined in the report, what Caroline is asking for is a number of lots to be located on the south end of the hamlet, going down toward along Richmond Road, and to at least match up with the hamlet designation on the Bayham side of the road. This would provide opportunity for a few more lots in the hamlet, and while she does have a fair amount of land presently designated as hamlet due to the natural water course, hazard land, that type of thing, it really can't be utilized. But she would like at least to be considered for the possible extension of the hamlet to the south to match up with what's on the Bayham side of the road. While I guess I'm talking about Colton, I can carry on. If you look at over the last, I guess 17 years that I've been doing consulting work in Malahide, there has been a fair amount of growth in the hamlet areas located south of Highway 3. And in many ways or many cases, this is a tribute to the growing Mennonite population within the township. I've certainly been involved, I think, in at least 2 Mennonite schools, several Mennonite church expansions, and that community likes to focus their lives around their where they live and their churches and their schools. And I think we would be doing a disservice to that community if we don't provide at least some limited opportunities in those hamlet areas, particularly those south of Highway 3. The Mennonite community has invested in both churches, schools, a number of Mennonite businesses, and have provided, when I think about it, a lot of assessment growth for Malahide, and certainly do play and will continue to play an important life in the lives of the township of Malahide. And I would hate to see them hampered where they could not have some opportunities for new lot development, build homes, that type of thing, in those communities to which they've established themselves as really being predominantly a Mennonite communities. Another consideration, and I know that your planner, now CAO, is aware of, and I'm not sure whether the consultants are, but the position being taken by the Director of Planning for the county in terms of new development has been to take the position that no new development, particularly subdivisions, and only very limited infill rounding out should be permitted on private services or partial services. This in your neighboring municipality of Bayham has put the brakes on, I think, 3 or 4 subdivisions that I've been involved with. And if that position is taken, there would be virtually no new activity taking place in any of your hamlets. And only in Springfield, if full municipal services, that in this case, water services and adequate capacities provided in the municipal sewage facility to accommodate development. Now, what that would result in order to make development financially feasible and have a community that, in case of Springfield, that could support municipal sewer water services at sewer water rates that are reasonable, I guess is the best way to put it, would have to attract some fairly large developments. And I think what you would see if that were the case would be, number one, a more dense, compact community, obviously, but would be really attracting people from the London area, those people commuting for jobs in London and elsewhere in southwestern Ontario. This has been particularly true if you look at Aylmer, Tillsonburg, those communities, most of the new growth and the new people moving in are from outside the areas. Myself, having just moved to Tillsonburg, living in a brand new subdivision. I'm finding people from Greater Toronto area, Ottawa, Kingston, actually all over Ontario. And so I think what you would get is it'd be a cultural change for the community of Springfield that just maybe many of the people living there wouldn't be too excited about. Experience tells me that in most cases, in order to get provincial money to fund these expansion of municipal services, generally they've gone to areas where there have been known environmental issues or conditions that warranted immediate action, and money was provided by the province. But if the intent was in Springfield to provide the money comes from the developers, in order to make it feasible, you'd have to see some very large developments. And again, would be a cultural change, certainly for that community. But that's kind of where we're heading if we look at the policies being put out by the county planner. And I do have some issues with that. You did raise in your presentation that subdivision in Port Bruce. I was actually the agent for that one. And it did, I believe, have draft approval at one time, but I believe the owners had abandoned that. And I don't think the province actually delegated or moved that file to the county. And the recollection of, yes, the cost of getting a road up to the top of the hill to those lots was going to be prohibitive. And that's why that didn't happen. The only other area I'd like to just briefly mention is that Aylmer East area. And I had done work for a farmer within Malahide. And what we were told was that by MTO, they would not permit any new accesses in that area unless the municipality, in this case, I guess, Malahide and Aylmer would fund a study to abandon the infamous Aylmer bypass, which has been on the books, I believe, since the mid-60s. And I don't see the province spending money on bypass for Aylmer or Delhi or Dunnville, where they had secured they had secured lands for bypass. Again, those are my comments, and I thank council for the opportunity to speak to it this evening. And again, congratulations to the council and to the staff who have participated in this review. We've done a really good job, in my opinion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, David, for those comments. And I guess the question to Jay and Dan, there was his client is Caroline Davis and had a request to square this off with the Bayham side. Any comments on that, Jay or Dan?
Dan, can you comment to the specifics?
I don't have a particular one in front of me, but essentially just from memory, it was a more or less a transfer of the designation where the where the lands involved would be it would be an equal amount basically of lands that would be redesignated at the south end of the hamlet area, from what I can recollect.
And through you, your worship, I can also speak to it to some extent. Ms. Davis's lands are already currently designated, as Dan had mentioned through that slideshow. The current configuration would require a small cul-de-sac coming off of one of the township roads with a number of lots fronting onto that new cul-de-sac, similar to what we've recently seen in Lyons, something in that regard. Ms. Davis, through Mr. O, is looking to reconfigure that so that it's fronting onto Richmond Road in a mirror image to what we see across the street in Bayham Municipality. So what the provincial policy statement is now requiring is that we see limited infill or minor rounding out of those unserviced settlement areas. I think the existing settlement area, the way it's configured, which would allow for a small cul-de-sac, would contemplate minor rounding out. Changing the configuration along Richmond would not satisfy that, but it's something that we can look at, and Monteith Brown can take a look at that if council deems appropriate.
Okay, and well, we'll leave it with you folks to come up for the second round.
Thank you.
All right, next we have Kelvin. Kelvin, are you there?
Yep. Yes, I am, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
I'm Dick Greenway, Kelvin's father-in-law. We already indicated that we are in favor of the recommendations. However, I have a concern about the boundary limits not being shown around the property. What happens if the county says, okay, this is not in the hamlet designation, and kiboshes our whole idea.
Dick, which photo were you looking at?
I'm sorry, we're at Kingsville Corners. The recommendation is for the home-based occupation for the area to the east of Dorchester Road. The boundary limits have not been shown to include our property, and I think in order to have a smooth approval of this through the county system, we would likely be required to be in the hamlet in order to get that designation. So I'm just wondering, is that a technicality that needs to be looked at this time, or?
Dan or Jay wish to make comment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dan, jump in if you need to supplement any of the information. I'll just draw everybody's attention to the note. Is my screen still present for everybody?
Yep.
So if you check the note in regard to home-based industrial parks, it's one of 3 locations that have been recommended for inclusion to settlement areas through the official plan review process. And we're seeking direction from council on what will it be all 3? Will it be 2? Will it be 1? What is the desire? And once that determination is made, then the lands will be brought into the settlement area boundary.
Thank you for the answer. Thank you.
Does that satisfy you, Dick?
Yes, that's what I wanted to hear.
Okay. Anything else, Kelvin?
No, not at this time.
Okay, thank you. We'll next move on to the members of council, and certainly I'm pleased to see that by 2029, we need 327 new houses. A lot of them, the rural municipalities are losing population and losing tax base, so this is certainly a positive move. The other thing I was pleased to see that there's accommodation for our Amish community. I know the provincial policy is 100 acres is the minimum farm size, but these folks need to have some agricultural base to accommodate their lifestyle. So I'm pleased to see that we're looking at something less than 100 acres. So at this point in time, I'll turn it over to any other members of council which wish to make comments or statements.
I have one if I could.
Go ahead, Mark.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess you alluded to the fact that 133 acres in Port Bruce would be returned to agriculture. Can we bring that map up and show me where this changes? I didn't realize Port Bruce had that much agriculture. Is it possible to look at that map or not really?
For you, Your Worship, Dan, or Jay, if you were sharing your screen I couldn't see it on mine just recently when you were speaking about Kingsville Corners. So I don't know if everyone else saw it, but I couldn't see it there. So you just made, yeah.
There we go.
Apologies, I don't know what happened there.
Okay. So you've got 133 acres. Can you tell me where that is? Or is it the part up above?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. Everything that's in this dashed gray line is the removal from the settlement area. So there's lands designated both residential and open space that are being proposed to, well, there would be no change to the open space. It would be the removal of the residential lands.
So it's the old
No,
plan of
no.
subdivision.
Okay. It's on top of the hill then.
Yep, on the bluff. Dominique, you had a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I guess the takeaway is that, so we're trying to concentrate development and we're tying development to services. So if that's a fair interpretation, I wanted to reconcile that with some of the comments that were made already. So in the new PPS, there is added language for and added flexibility for rural townships like ours to actually not be bound to municipal services and perhaps have more flexibility. And that was new of 2020. And I think there was an advocacy related to that. But I see that we or the county is kind of moving away from that. And interestingly, I also want to point that at the county, I think that it is causing, as part of the official plan review process, it is causing quite a bit of reaction. And as part of a meeting we're having tomorrow, it is something that staff is researching further in terms of options. Because I wanted to reconcile, if that's the direction we're going, why did the PPS actually try to help municipalities like ours be more flexible? And because I'm also trying to reconcile that with the preference, like the cultural preference, which was alluded to earlier, the lifestyle, the community, the type of community we're building with, local schools and sort of hamlet style. So I want to make sure that's not lost, through the county direction. And I'm also wondering, we are conducting a feasibility study right now on servicing Springfield, which to me, that tells me that we don't know. If we knew that it was feasible, we wouldn't be conducting a feasibility study. That means that maybe there's a 50-50 chance. So what's our plan B? So let's say the feasibility study comes back and it's no. I see a plan here that has all of our eggs in that particular, servicing basket. So interested in your thoughts.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Very insightful questions. Not sure I can answer all of them to the fullest extent, but I will give you what I can give you. There are still opportunities for development, as Adam alluded to earlier, that infill and rounding out. As we went through each of those settlements within your community, we identified areas that had been constrained, and those areas that were constrained were the first areas to be considered for removal. Other areas that just didn't make sense from a population distribution perspective were also high on the block for reconsideration for adjustment. The other compelling matter is you've got sanitary servicing in Springfield and nowhere else. Our discussions with municipal staff through this process has indicated and suggested an unlikeliness to have municipal services or municipal sanitary services in any of the other communities in any short-term planning to medium-term planning. But there is an expressed desire, and has been a long-standing expressed desire in the 10 or so years that we've been providing consulting planning services to the municipality, to see an extension of water service up to Springfield to create a fully municipally serviced settlement area. One of the challenges to doing so is the impetus, or a lack of impetus for that extension. What we were trying to do through the redistribution of lands and the direction in which that distribution was occurring was trying to close the distance gap between the existing services, the existing water service, and Springfield. Trying to get the lands to extend as far south and west as possible to make it closer, and trying to introduce opportunities for industrial development that could also be a catalyst for the extension of water services to that community. So we believe that is an important element as well. My understanding, and I can't speak to this definitively, I would direct to either Adam or to Matt in terms of what is happening on your feasibility study, but I don't understand or believe it to be whether or not the provision of water service is actually capable of occurring, but rather what is the preferred approach and what is it going to cost? And I'll turn it over to staff to fill in the gaps on what I'm not aware of on that particular study in terms of timing and opportunity.
Yes, through you, Your Worship, I'll just speak to the feasibility study. We started that process and council directed staff to start that process after it considered the service delivery review last year. And it's staff are of the opinion, and the consultants who's begun working on it, it's not a matter of if it is feasible or not, it's but how can the council deliver and implement such services with minimal impact to our current residents and ratepayers. How do we share that burden with other levels of government, with the development community, through development charges, those sorts of things. It's really a strategy. The feasibility study will look at if there is an answer that says it's not feasible, notwithstanding we don't expect that to happen, but if that's the answer, I would suggest that our plan B might be going back to that sort of unserviced growth strategy that we see in other municipalities. Now, I believe the PPS provides flexibility, and it's my professional opinion as a planner that flexibility is provided for municipalities that have no ability, whether financial or physical, to service some of their growth areas. We are not in that position. Springfield is an established village. We've come close to losing a school. We are seeing our downtown commercial areas in a decline, and we're looking at through a service delivery review how our delivery of goods and services, primarily our public works department in delivering services, is better focused when we focus our growth in one larger. It's not to say that our other hamlets will disappear. Like I said, they will allow minor rounding out and minor infill to occur, but this will allow sustainable growth to occur in Springfield, allow our schools to stay open, allow us to get some new parks and amenities, and allow our businesses to flourish, and allow new businesses and industries to establish. There was a couple comments about culture. I may let Mr. Rowe or yourself, Dominique, speak to what culture you're speaking of, but what I do note that a lot of communities struggle with this is there are families who are established in these areas, but when their kids are growing up or looking to start their own families, there's no housing options, there's no affordable housing options, there's no semi-detached dwellings. They're looking, those individuals or those new families need to move to the Woodstocks, the Londons, and other areas with the St. Thomas's to start, and then hopefully come back to places like Springfield or Copenhagen or Lyons to continue living close to their family in Malahide. So those are the things that we're looking to do with Springfield. We know through the service delivery review that it's difficult for Malahide to sustain itself on a status quo basis of this type of growth moving forward. So this is what we're looking to do. This is a pivotal time, and at this juncture, Springfield is where we have the momentum to continue it forward. So I will leave that there. That's where the feasibility study is. We believe it is likely feasible. We're looking to how it's done. But if it's determined not to be feasible, perhaps we'll go back and look at our existing 10 hamlets about some growth opportunities there.
Okay, thank you, Adam, for that explanation. Anyone else on council wishing to make comment or question?
Yes.
Go ahead, Jess.
In case Springfield is a no-go and a plan B is looked at, why are we moving land from Mount Salem to Springfield when water is only 2 miles away from Mount Salem? And there is a lot of land right around Mount Salem that is potential subdivision material. I find it hard to understand why we're moving land. I know what the planner said to augment the situation in Springfield, but in case that doesn't go, I can't see why Mount Salem might not be a plan B. I'll leave that for someone to comment on.
Yes, yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. When we have settlement areas that are serviced with water, but not serviced with sanitary, and there's sanitary is not close to Mount Salem to begin with, the Ministry of Environment almost looks at those situations worse than being unserviced entirely, because those areas that are serviced with water but are on private weeping beds have tendencies to over inundate their weeping beds because they have no reason to conserve water. They're on municipal water. So that's the situation with Mount Salem. I'd be of the opinion, Councillor Galinsky, that if we can get Springfield moving in the next 10 to 15 years, then following that time, we will start looking to move south towards Mount Salem, those other areas, and ultimately Port Bruce. But as the service delivery study found, we need to get some bona fide growth and development, increase our assessment, and increase our jobs and housing opportunities, and we can do that in Springfield. So I hope that answers your question about servicing in Mount Salem.
Mayor Manel, if I may continue.
Go ahead, Jess.
It does answer a lot of questions. However, when you look at Mount Salem, we already have one industry along Carlton Line. We do have church and school in the proximity of Mount Salem, which Springfield has as well. So I would hate to think that we can just discount Mount Salem at this point in time and wait for 10 years to see what happens later on. I would hope that we could keep it in the back of our minds that there is a possibility at Mount Salem with water, and we'd be in a similar situation as Copenhagen, because they have water but no sewage other than weeping beds. I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jess. Anyone else have questions or comments?
Just to follow up, Mr. Mayor, if I may, just to
Go ahead,
ask
Dominique.
about sort of process. So are we to, in terms of timing, so can we expect them to review the feasibility study results before finalizing the official plan and perhaps looking at other scenarios after this evening?
Jay?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think Mr. Betteridge may be in a better position to respond on timing of receiving of that. Certainly, I'm in council's hands. This is your document, it's your process, and we will work to your needs.
Thank you.
Adam?
Thank you, Jay, and through you, Mr. Mayor. The feasibility study is certainly very important in this. What I believe the policies will say, so if we are looking at Springfield Village here, and we've got some future designations, there will be policies that say that development on those lands can only occur on full municipal services. So notwithstanding they'll be designated when council adopts, there will be policies that essentially puts them in a holding pattern until services are extended to the municipality. I think that's going to be the approach there. I should also speak to the fact that it's not just the feasibility study we'll be waiting for. It's also the County of Allegan through their process too. I think I've brought this up to council previously before a number of times. I've had discussions with Nancy. Nancy seems satisfied with our approach to date. It's calculated, it's managed. We through Monteith Brown, they've done the calculations, they've done the comprehensive review to determine we're not arbitrarily adding hectares beyond what we can demonstrate. What we are looking to do is shift from what we have, as Jane and have walked through, and the county's supportive of that. What we have done, and I'm totally aware that we are ahead of the county in its process. If there are any discrepancies that are significant enough that need to be changed following adoption by county council of its new official or of its official plan, we will immediately go back and make whatever adjustments those need to be. So if the county determines that some settlement areas in Malahide don't line up to what we had adopted as an example, we can go back and adjust those. But the county does seem quite supportive of our approach to looking at service growth in Springfield.
Does that satisfy you, Dominique?
Yes, I'm okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from council? We're almost at the end. So hearing none, thank you, Jay and Dan, for the presentation. And I guess we'll look forward to the next steps. But we need a mover and seconder. The council adjourn its meeting at 9 o'clock to meet again on July the 8th at 7:30.
I'll move it.
Move. Second.
Linsky and Widner, all in favor?
Councillor Widner,
Yes.
Councillor Moore,
Yes.
Councillor Galinsky, Deputy Mayor Jaguar,
Yes.
Mayor Mennel,
Yes,
that's carried.
thank you. Well, it's only Dominique's that and I are gonna say go Habs go, but I think they started an hour ago. I don't know what the score is, so
I don't know either. Good night.
take care.
Good night.
Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you.